The galactic dominion's throne room shimmered beneath cold, metallic light, its vast pillars casting long shadows across the polished obsidian floor. Emperor Vortax sat slouched on his jagged throne, talons tapping in irritation as his advisors murmured about the humans again, soft-skinned newcomers who dared enter the interstellar stage. Their recent diplomatic gains annoyed him more than any military threat. Humans were unpredictable, unrefined, and worst of all, respected by several of his rival houses. He wanted to remind the galaxy of humanity's place beneath him. A cruel smile peeled across his scaled jaw as a thought formed. A gift. A gesture of goodwill that would serve as the perfect insult. His eldest daughter, Thalrana, stood at the base of the throne, broad-shouldered and towering above the guards flanking her. Her obsidian scales shimmered, dense and thick, a trait inherited from ancient warrior queens, yet one her father found embarrassing. To him, she was bulky, inelegant, a reminder of his first wife whom he despised. Vortax's gaze slithered over her frame with distaste before he pronounced his decision. "You will travel to the human frontier world," he said, voice dripping with false magnanimity. "You shall be presented as a diplomatic bride to their colony governor." The court fell silent. Thalrana's heart struck against her ribs. A bride? To humans? Her father's tone made the reason clear. This wasn't an honor. It was exile wrapped as ceremony, humiliation dressed as duty. But she bowed anyway, each movement tense with suppressed emotion. She had spent her life fighting for a place in a world that could not fathom her worth. Perhaps this mission would offer a kind of freedom, even if carved from mockery. Light rippled across her armor as she turned, masking the sting behind an expression of stoic resolve. Court nobles whispered as she passed, voices sharp with derision, yet she walked with the poise of someone who refused to break, though a quiet fear coiled in her chest. If humans shared her father's judgment, the journey ahead would be exile indeed. Far from the Emperor's suffocating palace, humanity's frontier colony hummed with the rough charm of improvisation. Steel beams, repurposed cargo crates, mismatched hangars, all welded into a functional sprawl by crews who cared more for results than aesthetics. And among those crews, bending over a half-dismantled engine core, was Elias Ward. Elias worked in a rhythm of sparks and grease, sleeves rolled to the elbow, his mind fixed on the stubborn plasma regulator resisting his efforts. His broad hands moved with surprising delicacy, coaxing damaged circuits back to life as though speaking a language only machines understood. He was well known on the station, a dependable mechanic with an easy smile, a man who preferred engines over politics. People brought him broken things because he always found a way to repair them, sometimes including their spirits. But beneath his calm surface lived an unexpected fascination. Elias had always admired alien physiology, especially the powerful forms of species like the Dominions. Where others saw intimidation, he saw elegance. Where they saw bulk, he saw strength. For reasons he rarely voiced, the larger alien women inspired a quiet yearning he didn't bother hiding from himself. Still, life offered little opportunity for such an unusual preference. The frontier was lonely, and he had made peace with that. When the governor announced that an imperial envoy was inbound with a gift of political significance, the colony buzzed with anxious theories. Some feared a trap. Others expected demands. No one anticipated something benign, and Elias stayed clear of the diplomatic chatter until he was summoned to repair a malfunctioning thruster on the Dominion warship expected to arrive. The day the massive vessel pierced the clouds, the colony fell into uneasy silence. Its hull, forged from dark metal that drank the sunlight, loomed like a drifting fortress. Engines roared with the deep resonance of ancient technology far beyond human design. A boarding ramp unfolded with theatrical menace, and armored guards stepped forward in rigid formation. Then she appeared. Princess Thalrana's silhouette filled the ramp before she even took her first step. Massive, imposing, elegant in a way humans had no word for. Her scales glimmered with shifting iridescence, each plate overlapping like crafted armor. Muscles layered beneath her ceremonial tunic spoke of immense strength, though her posture carried a restraint that made her seem almost fragile, almost. The humans stared, caught between awe and confusion. They had been prepared for condescension, not for the overwhelming presence of a towering alien princess whose very stance commanded respect. Thalrana surveyed the humans with careful composure, concealing her tension beneath disciplined poise. If they were repulsed, she would endure it. She had endured worse at home. But one pair of eyes didn't match the others. Elias, summoned early for the thruster malfunction, arrived at the hangar still wiping grease from his palms. The moment he saw her, he froze, not out of fear, but astonishment. Something about her size, her strength, her quiet vulnerability beneath the armor struck him instantly and deeply. Thalrana's gaze brushed past uniformed officials and paused when it found Elias. She expected disgust. Instead, she saw warmth, steady, unflinching, curious. No whisper of mockery. No tightening of the jaw. Just the calm recognition of someone who saw her as more than a symbol or burden. She felt something shift inside her, a flicker of unfamiliar hope. The governor stepped forward to welcome her, voice breaking with uncertainty, but Thalrana barely heard him. Her attention remained fixed on the human mechanic who regarded her not as an insult or a spectacle, but as a person worthy of being seen. For the first time since leaving her father's palace, she wondered whether her journey might not be exile after all. Perhaps it was the beginning of something else, something she had never dared imagine. The reception chamber had been hastily reorganized to mimic diplomatic formality, though the mismatched chairs and hastily polished floors betrayed the colony's frontier nature. Humans lined the perimeter, engineers still in coveralls, administrators trying to look official, guards gripping rifles with unnecessary tension. In the center stood Thalrana, her towering presence drawing every gaze like a gravitational well. Her ceremonial tunic draped across her scaled frame with an elegance that contrasted sharply against the cluttered room, yet she held herself rigidly, bracing for the judgments she knew would follow. The governor stepped forward with a courtesy that didn't quite hide his anxiety. He attempted to deliver a scripted greeting, but the moment he stumbled over an alien honorific, the room thickened with embarrassment. Thalrana's expression didn't shift. She had heard far worse in her father's court. Still, she sensed the human's uncertainty, and a flicker of loneliness stirred within her. She had been sent to humiliate them, and yet she felt strangely sympathetic. They looked unprepared, under-resourced, and, unlike the Dominion aristocrats, honest in their intentions. Elias entered quietly, summoned to inspect the warship's malfunctioning docking thruster. He expected chaos. He didn't expect to find the princess standing in the center, illuminated by the overhead lights like a figure carved from obsidian and starlight. Her eyes met his for the second time, and something in the air shifted again. Less shock this time, more recognition. She watched him approach with cautious curiosity. His steps were steady, unhurried, free of the apprehension that clung to the others. When he bowed his head slightly in greeting, she felt a warmth spread through her chest in a way she had not permitted since childhood. "I'm Elias," he said, his voice firm but not reverent. "I was called to take a look at your ship's thruster. If you'll allow it." That last phrase, "if you'll allow it," carried a quiet respect she rarely received. She inclined her head, granting permission, though her guards stiffened at the gesture. As Elias walked past her, she felt the faint brush of human warmth near her arm. He paused long enough to glance up at her with a soft, earnest smile. The moment passed quickly, but it rooted itself in her thoughts as firmly as any proclamation. He made his way to the docking bay where Dominion engineers argued over the malfunctioning machinery. Their frustration was palpable. Alien technology was not meant to be handled by frontier humans. They parted reluctantly as Elias approached, their disdain barely concealed. Thalrana remained in the doorway, observing him with an intensity she didn't bother hiding. He knelt beside the thruster's exposed panel and began working with quiet concentration. His hands moved with confidence, not arrogance. He traced wiring patterns, hummed thoughtfully at misaligned components, and addressed each step aloud as though explaining his process to the room, though she suspected the habit came from years of working alone. She noticed details the others overlooked: the gentleness in his touch, the precision in his fingertips, the way his brow furrowed when he found a damaged conduit scorched by overheating. He approached machinery with the same care she wished someone would approach her, with patience, with understanding, with genuine interest. When he finally sealed the panel and powered the thruster for a test cycle, the machinery hummed smoothly, vibrating through the floor with renewed stability. Dominion engineers exchanged begrudging looks, while Thalrana felt something unfamiliar, pride, not in herself, but in him. Elias stood, wiping his hands on the cloth tucked into his belt. "Your ship is good to go," he said simply. Then he looked at her again, this time with a hint of playful confidence. "Seems like she just needed someone to actually listen to her." Her lips parted in surprise. Among her people, she was called heavy, cumbersome, excessive. No one had ever compared her to something worth listening to, something requiring care rather than correction. She stepped forward, lowering herself slightly so her voice carried only to him. "You speak to machines as though they are alive," she murmured. He chuckled. "Sometimes they act like it, especially the stubborn ones." Her eyes glimmered. "Then perhaps you would understand my people better than most humans." For a brief moment, she allowed herself to meet his gaze fully. In those warm brown eyes, she found no mockery, no repulsion, only a human man fascinated by what stood before him. But the moment broke abruptly when the Emperor's envoy approached, his voice sharp as fractured metal. "Princess Thalrana," he hissed, "you are expected for a cultural briefing. You must not linger with technicians." Elias felt the sting of the envoy's tone, but Thalrana reacted first. She turned toward the envoy with a calm that masked the subtle tightening of her jaw. "Technicians," she said slowly, "are the reason your ship has not crashed into this planet. Respect is owed where it is earned." The envoy recoiled slightly, unaccustomed to her defiance. Elias tried not to smile. She noticed anyway. As she followed the envoy out, she paused at the threshold, her voice low enough for only Elias to hear. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing more than what others choose to see." He watched her depart, her silhouette framed by the hangar lights, each step resonating with restrained power. The governor approached him moments later, muttering about diplomatic disaster and unpredictable alien customs, but Elias barely heard a word. His thoughts were fixed instead on the princess's quiet gratitude and the gravity of the journey she seemed trapped in. In that brief exchange, a bond had begun to form, fragile, tentative, yet undeniably alive. And neither of them fully understood how deeply it would reshape the conflict brewing between their worlds. The colony's mechanical wing had never hosted royalty before, yet Thalrana found the rough-edged corridors strangely comforting. Here, metal spoke honestly. Here, the scent of coolant and solder didn't mask hidden agendas. Elias walked beside her, guiding her through the workshop's maze of cables and humming conduits as though she were not an imperial symbol but a welcome guest. His presence steadied her, though she fought to maintain the composed dignity expected of a princess who had been sent as a political pawn. He led her to a cleared space near his workstation, where parts from a dozen species technologies lay neatly arranged. "I thought you might want somewhere quieter," he said, rubbing a smudge of grease from his cheek. "The governor keeps trying to impress your entourage. I figured you deserved a break from all that." She took in the chaotic harmony of the workshop, the half-finished engine, the dangling tools, the flickering holo-display, and felt a warmth unfurling inside her chest. "Your kindness is unusual," she said softly. "Most approach me with fear or calculation, not consideration." "Maybe they don't know how to look past the armor," he replied, gesturing to the layers of hardened plating covering her shoulders and arms. "But I fix things for a living. I notice details." The words settled over her like a bomb. She lowered herself carefully onto a reinforced crate Elias had pushed her way. Even sitting, she towered over him, but he didn't seem intimidated. Instead, he rummaged through a drawer and pulled out a custom tool shaped to accommodate thick claws instead of fingers. "I made this last night," he said, offering it to her. "Your people's engineering uses torque levels humans can't manage, and your guards won't share their equipment. I thought you might want something made for you, not for protocol." Her breath caught. The tool was simple, but its handle wrapped securely around her claws and its weighted structure matched the strength of her wrist. It was the first object crafted for her rather than despite her. She closed her hand around it, feeling a spark of gratitude she couldn't fully voice. "You crafted this yourself," she murmured. "For someone you barely know." Elias shrugged. "That's how knowing someone starts." She looked away, pretending to examine the tool, though in truth she was steadying her emotions. No one in the imperial court had ever bothered to treat her as anything more than an inconvenience. This human, in a cramped workshop under flickering lights, offered her a consideration her own blood had never shown. To distract herself, she asked about the engine he'd been repairing earlier. Elias brightened immediately, launching into an explanation of coolant efficiency, misaligned power couplings, and a workaround he'd developed using scrap components. Thalrana listened closely, intrigued by the ingenuity humans use to compensate for limited resources. When he finished, she stood, moved to the engine's exposed casing, and demonstrated a stabilization technique known only to Dominion engineers. Her claws worked with surprising delicacy as she recalibrated the plasma distributor. Elias watched in awe. "I didn't know your tech could be adjusted manually like that." "It isn't meant to be," she said with a faint smile. "But sometimes what is meant and what is possible are different." Their collaboration unfolded naturally after that, an exchange of skills, perspectives, and quiet insights. He showed her how humans solved technical problems using improvisation rather than brute strength. She taught him how Dominion device cores responded to particular harmonic frequencies. Their differences complemented one another, weaving a subtle thread of connection neither could ignore. As hours passed, the workshop softened with the glow of shared focus. But the fragile peace fractured when a cluster of armored Dominion envoys appeared in the doorway, their expressions taut with suspicion. Their leader, a tall, narrow-scaled officer named Varask, surveyed the scene with thinly veiled disdain. "Princess," he said sharply, "you were not authorized to interact with human laborers unsupervised. Your presence here undermines imperial dignity." Thalrana straightened, her scales shifting as she rose to her full height. "I require no supervision. I am learning. That is not a threat to dignity." Varask's gaze darted to Elias with contempt. "Humans will take advantage of your temperament. You are too trusting for your own good." Elias stiffened but held his tongue. The insult wasn't subtle, Varask didn't intend it to be. Thalrana stepped forward, positioning herself subtly between the envoy and the mechanic. "Elias has shown me nothing but respect," she said, voice firm. "Unlike some." Varask's jaw tightened. "Your father expects discipline, not indulgence. Do not forget why he sent you here." The words struck like a blade. She knew exactly what they implied, that she was an embarrassment disguised as diplomacy. But before she could respond, a sudden tremor rattled through the floor, followed by the shriek of an alarm. Red lights bathed the workshop. Elias grabbed a scanner, eyes widening as he read the fluctuating energy levels. "Something's wrong in the engine bay," he said. "The plasma readings are completely unstable, like something was tampered with." Varask barked orders to his guards, but Thalrana ignored him. Her instincts surged forward, sharpened by training and fear. "Show me," she said to Elias, already moving. They sprinted down the corridor, metal vibrating beneath their feet. Elias's scanner flickered with escalating warnings. "This isn't a malfunction," he muttered. "Someone planted something. A destabilizer, maybe." The realization snapped through Thalrana like ice. Sabotage. When they reached the engine bay, heat shimmered through the air. A glowing device pulsed beneath the primary conduit, siphoning stability from the plasma core. Elias dropped to his knees, working furiously to disable it. Thalrana positioned herself beside him, claws gripping the scorching metal casing to hold it open despite the pain searing her palms. "Tell me what to do," she demanded. He guided her through each step, rewiring the disruptor, rerouting the power feedback, isolating the core's reaction. Their movements blended in urgent synchrony, human precision and alien strength working as one. Finally, with a crackling surge, the device sputtered and died. The core stabilized. The alarms faded. Elias exhaled shakily, collapsing back onto the floor. "That should not have been there." Thalrana lowered herself beside him, her burned claws trembling. "Someone wishes to ignite conflict," she whispered, "and we have just disrupted their plan." Their eyes met, and in the pulsing glow of the cooling engine, an unspoken truth deepened between them. Whatever force sought to divide their worlds had just made a grave miscalculation. It had bound the two of them together. The engine bay still smelled of scorched metal hours after the alarms had fallen silent. Emergency crews swept in and out, recording readings, checking containment shields, and trying to determine how a destabilizer had been smuggled aboard a Dominion vessel. Yet despite the bustle, an uneasy stillness clung to the edges of the room. Elias felt it in the way the engineers spoke in hushed tones. Thalrana felt it in the way the envoys watched her with tightened jaws and narrowed eyes. The sabotage had exposed something deeper than a simple act of malice. It had pierced the illusion of cooperation her father had pretended to offer. Varask stood with a datapad clenched in his claws, analyzing sensor logs with stiff movements. The other guards clustered nearby like a wall of disapproval. Elias tried to ignore them, but he could feel their hostility simmering. Thalrana sensed it too. She moved toward Elias, her burned claws wrapped in cooling bandages, each step heavy with controlled fury. "They believe I had a hand in this," she murmured, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "You saved the engine," Elias replied firmly. "Anyone here knows that. Truth does not matter to the ones who serve my father. Only obedience." Varask approached before Elias could respond, his expression carved in stone. "Princess, your presence is required in the tactical chamber. The Emperor will address this incident personally." His emphasis on personally carried a sinister undertone. Thalrana's tail flicked once, an involuntary sign of unease. "I will come shortly. I must speak with Elias first." Varask's gaze snapped to the human mechanic, filled with open contempt. "You have already spoken too much with this human. Your father will not approve of such familiarity." "Then let him disapprove," she said, her tone sharpened by an edge she rarely revealed. Varask stiffened, taken aback, but he withdrew with a curt bow. Elias stepped closer to her once the envoys were out of earshot. "This wasn't just sabotage," he said quietly. "Whoever planted that device wanted to start a war." She nodded, her shoulders sinking slightly. "My father gains much from conflict. Diplomacy slows him. Peace embarrasses him. Sending me here was meant to be an insult. Now he has a pretext for outrage. And he'll blame humanity," Elias finished. A hollow ache settled in her chest. She had known her father valued power above blood, but the precision of the sabotage, and how quickly he had summoned her, revealed intentions more dangerous than she feared. "If he believes the humans have harmed one of his ships under my watch, he will not hesitate to retaliate." Elias watched her carefully. He had grown accustomed to the shifting play of emotions across her scaled face, subtle but expressive once one knew how to see it. Right now, her eyes burned with fear, not for herself, but for the colony. "Whatever happens in that meeting," he said, "you don't face it alone." His words struck deeper than he realized. Before she could respond, Varask signaled again, impatience clear in every rigid angle of his posture. Thalrana drew a slow breath and left with the regal stride expected of someone raised in shadowed palaces. The tactical chamber was dim and cold, dominated by a holographic projection of Emperor Vortak's angular face. His eyes glowed with the cruel curiosity of a predator. Thalrana stood tall, though her claws ached and her heart beat too loudly. "My daughter," Vortak drawled, "I hear your visit has already produced unfortunate complications." She met his stare without flinching. The sabotage was deliberate. Someone wished to provoke hostilities between our peoples. "And you believe humans capable of such interference?" "No," she said calmly. "Their technology lacks the sophistication required. Someone else, someone with access, must have acted." A faint smile tugged at the Emperor's maw. "You defend them with remarkable vigor. I defend only the truth." "Truth is a subjective resource," he replied. "But loyalty is not. Perhaps your time among these primitives has softened your priorities." The accusation landed like a spear. Thalrana clenched her bandaged claws. My priorities remain unchanged. I seek clarity, integrity, peace. Vorthack's expression hardened. Peace? You sound like your mother. He paused, letting the insult fester. Return to the flagship. You will be evaluated for susceptibility to foreign influence. Her pulse faltered. Evaluation was a euphemism, one she understood all too well. As you command, she said stiffly, masking the dread creeping up her spine. The Emperor's hologram flickered out, leaving only cold silence behind. Guards escorted her back toward the docking ramp. Every step felt heavier. She thought of Elias, the calm certainty in his voice, the kindness in his smile, the trust he had shown without hesitation. Her father would use her connection to the humans against her, and she had no doubt he planned to make an example of her disobedience. The moment she reached the boarding platform, Elias appeared at the edge of the corridor, breathless from running. His eyes swept over her, reading the tension in her posture. What did he say? He asked. She hesitated, struggling against a swell of vulnerability she rarely revealed. He is recalling me, and he intends to punish me for what he perceives as disloyalty. Elias stepped forward, lowering his voice. Because you defended us? Because I failed to be the useful pawn he wanted. He clenched his fists. Anger flickered across his face, not directed at her but at the cruelty she had endured for so long. You don't have to go back. Her breath hitched. If I refuse, he will strike the colony. You would pay for my rebellion. Then we find another way, he said, voice trembling with determination. You're not facing him alone. For the first time since she left the palace, her composure cracked. She lowered her forehead to his, a gesture from her culture reserved only for those one trusts deeply. I do not want to leave, she whispered. His hand rose to rest against her scaled cheek. Then don't. But Varask barked an order, and the moment shattered. Thalrana stepped back, torn between duty and the fragile bond forming between them. As she boarded the ship, Elias watched, helpless but far from resigned. Something had to change. Something had already begun. And the Emperor would soon discover that the daughter he tried to discard had found a reason to fight back. The storm shutters rattled against the mechanic bay as Eli stood beside the diagnostic cradle, watching the faint pulse of the bioreading stabilize. Lyra floated an inch above the metallic cushion, suspended in a cocoon of repair light that painted her scales in soft gradients. Hours earlier she had collapsed, her body overwhelmed by the sabotage meant for him. Even now, her breath had a faint tremor beneath each exhale, as if her lungs were relearning how to trust the air. Eli hadn't moved from her side. His fingers rested on the edge of the platform, tense but steady. He kept replaying the moment she'd shoved him out of harm's way, taking the brunt of the poisoned coolant blast. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't calculated. She had simply acted, her instinct to protect him more powerful than any fear of pain. Dr. Kessett approached with a new panel of readouts hovering over her wrist. Her voice remained calm, clinical, but her eyes betrayed the exhaustion of working through the night. She's stabilizing. Her physiology fought harder than I expected. She tapped forward a new screen. But she's still weakened. Whatever compound the saboteur used was engineered to target human biochemistry. She absorbed far more than a body like hers should have survived. She survived because she's Lyra, Eli said quietly. She doesn't know how to do anything halfway. Kessett gave a thin smile. You should rest. She'll wake when she's ready. But Eli didn't rest. He couldn't. He paced the room, the metallic floor echoing each restless turn. Every movement pushed his mind deeper into the knot forming behind his ribs. He couldn't shake the truth he'd been avoiding. Someone wanted him dead badly enough to use Lyra as collateral damage. And that meant the enemy wasn't just targeting him. They were targeting both of them. Together. When Lyra's breathing shifted, deeper and steadier, Eli was there instantly. Her eyelids lifted in slow, heavy blinks, her pupils adjusting to the bay's soft lighting. She looked disoriented, then confused, then sharply aware. You're safe, Eli whispered, leaning into her line of sight. I'm right here. Her voice emerged rough, a low vibration shaped into words. Who? Are unharmed? He laughed once, breathless with relief. I'm fine. Thanks to you. A faint glow rippled across her scales, the Dracari equivalent of a blush. But then I regret nothing. He touched her hand, letting his thumb trace the warm, pliant ridges along her palm. Someone tried to kill me, Lyra, and they nearly killed you instead. His voice hardened without him meaning it to. I won't let that happen again. Her gaze sharpened. You believe it was not an accident. I know it wasn't. Her fingers curled around his. Then we face it. Together. The word together resonated, carrying a weight neither of them had acknowledged explicitly until now. It was more than partnership, more than gratitude. It was a bond forged in something neither of them yet had the vocabulary to name. A sharp chime interrupted the moment. The bay doors slid open, revealing Commander Thrask, his armored plating glinting like forged obsidian. He surveyed the scene, expression unreadable, then stepped inside with a measured stride. Mechanic. Dracari princess. His voice rumbled with restrained tension. We have a situation. Eli stepped slightly in front of Lyra without thinking, earning a faint huff of amusement from Thrask. Relax, human. If I meant either of you harm, your body would already be cooling. Lyra straightened, pushing through her lingering weakness. Speak. Thrask projected a hologram above his gauntlet. It showed a cluster of Dracari warships gathering beyond the orbital ring, too many for a routine escort, too few for an official assault. They hovered like predators between breaths. Your father's fleet, Thrask said, but not under official orders. These are loyalist warships commanded by Regent Vaylor. Lyra inhaled sharply. My uncle. Eli recognized the name instantly, an ambitious statesman known for his disdain for humans and his hunger for authority. If Vaylor had moved his forces without imperial sanction, then this was no simple visit. What does he want? Eli asked. Thrask folded the projection away. Your death, human. And hers as collateral. Vaylor opposes the union her father arranged. He believes the Dracari throne should not be tied to a species he deems inferior. And he knows removing you will destabilize Emperor Karatha's treaty. Lyra's claws dug lightly into the diagnostic cushion. He dares. Thrask lifted a hand. He dares because he thinks you are vulnerable. He thinks you are unaware. His gaze turned toward Eli, sharp as a blade. He thinks the human is alone. Eli straightened. He's wrong. Thrask nodded once. Then you must prove it. The enemy is moving quickly, and the station is already compromised. If Vaylor succeeds, the treaty collapses, your father's rule weakens, and you, both of you, become symbols in a political war you never asked to fight. Eli looked at Lyra, and in her expression he saw a resolve that eclipsed fear. She swung her legs off the cradle, her movements unsteady but fueled by purpose. He stepped forward instinctively, catching her before she stumbled. She stabilized, leaning into him just long enough to regain her strength. Thank you, she murmured. When she stood fully upright, scales glowing with renewed determination, she faced Thrask with the authority of someone who had nearly died but refused to yield. Tell us what we must do, she said. Thrask inclined his head. Prepare yourselves. Vaylor's forces are preparing to board. They expect a frightened girl and an unarmed mechanic. His smile flickered, sharp and approving. Let us disappoint them. Eli felt something ignite inside him. Fear, yes, but also defiance, loyalty, and the unmistakable gravity of fighting not just for survival but for each other. Whatever Vaylor had begun, it would not end the way he expected. Not if he and Lyra faced it side by side. And as the first tremor of docking clamps shuddered through the station, Eli realized there was no turning back. The battle had arrived, and everything that mattered was now on the line. The first impact reverberated through the station like a hammer against hollow steel, sending vibrations through the mechanic bay floor. Eli steadied himself against the wall, instinctively pulling Lyra close as warning sirens cascaded into a shrill chorus. Thrask's voice crackled through the intercom, issuing orders to security teams mobilizing along the docking spine. The tension in the air thickened, almost tangible, as Valor's forces initiated forced boarding procedures. Lyra inhaled sharply, drawing strength from a reservoir deeper than her still-recovering body should have held. Her scales shimmered with a faint protective luminescence, each breath stabilizing her core energy. "We cannot let Valor seize the station," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "If he takes me, he gains leverage over my father. If he kills Eli, he destabilizes the entire alliance." Eli forced his fear into a tight knot beneath his ribs. "Then we don't let him near either of us." Thrask stormed into the bay, armor humming with activated combat shielding. "The first wave is through," he growled. "But they're not expecting resistance this far inward. You, mechanic, on me." He tossed Eli a compact plasma cutter, the weight surprisingly balanced in his hand. "That tool can slice their armor, but only if you don't hesitate." Eli nodded, gripping the cutter until his knuckles whitened. Lyra stepped beside him, her presence radiating a quiet fire that steadied him more than any weapon. Thrask led them down the corridor, its lights flickering as emergency power rerouted to defensive systems. Distant clashes echoed through the tight metal passageways, the clash of blade-like energy conduits and the guttural roars of Drakari warriors locked in combat. The trio halted at a junction where smoke drifted from a half-sealed bulkhead. Thrask raised a hand, signaling silence. Through the haze, Eli could see shadows advancing, heavily armored figures marked with Valor's crimson insignia. Lyra tensed beside him, every muscle coiled. Thrask launched first, his movements brutal and efficient. He crashed into the enemy squad with the force of a living avalanche, scattering them before they could stabilize. Eli moved on instinct, activating the plasma cutter and slicing at the gaps in an assailant's armor. Sparks erupted, and the soldiers staggered backward, stunned by the human's unexpected ferocity. A second attacker lunged toward Eli, but Lyra intercepted, her tail whipping with controlled precision. She struck with enough force to send the soldier careening into the bulkhead. Her chest heaved with the effort, but she stayed upright, refusing to show weakness. When the last enemy fell, Thrask surveyed the bodies with grim approval. "They're testing our defenses," he muttered. "Preparing for the main push. Valor will come personally once he believes we've been softened." "He'll underestimate us," Lyra said. "He always has." Eli glanced at her, surprised by the steel in her tone. "You've fought him before?" "Not with weapons," she replied. "With politics. With expectation. With the role he thinks I should play." Her eyes flicked to Eli, glowing faintly. "But he never anticipated you." Another tremor shook the corridor, this one deeper, more resonant, a sign that larger boarding ships had attached. Thrask grimaced. "He's here." They moved quickly, cutting through a maintenance conduit that bypassed the heaviest combat zones. The tight passage forced Eli and Lyra close together, their breaths mingling in the narrow space. Despite the urgency, he felt a momentary calm, as if the danger clarified everything that had been unspoken. When they emerged into the central atrium, the doors sealed shut behind them automatically, locking with a magnetic snap. The wide chamber was eerily empty, its soaring ceilings echoing with the distant rumble of battling forces. At the center stood Valor. He was larger than any Drakari Eli had encountered, his scales a brutal black edged with red, his armor sculpted into jagged contours. His presence radiated authority twisted by ambition, and when his gaze landed on Lyra, a slow, cold smile curved across his snout. "Niece," he rumbled. "You survived more than I intended." Lyra stepped forward, chin raised. "You dishonor our people with this treachery." Valor laughed, deep and contemptuous. "Your father dishonored us when he offered you to a human." His eyes slid to Eli, assessing, dismissive. A soft creature. A fragile joke. Eli felt heat rise in his chest, but before he could respond, Lyra spoke, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. "He is worth more than you will ever be." The smile vanished. Thrask shifted subtly, preparing for combat, but Valor raised a hand. "No. This is between me and the heirs of this foolish alliance." His gaze burned into Lyra. "And the human who dares stand beside her." With a sudden roar, Valor charged. Thrask intercepted him, their clash shaking the chamber, but Vaylor's strength overwhelmed the commander's defenses. Eli darted forward, activating the plasma cutter, targeting exposed joints in Vaylor's armor. Each strike forced Vaylor to shift his stance, buying Lyra precious seconds. She inhaled deeply, summoning the inner fire that coursed through her lineage. Her scales ignited in a brilliant surge of color, gold, turquoise, and deep crimson. When she exhaled, a focused beam of draconic energy streaked toward Vaylor, catching him square in the chest. He staggered backward, roaring in pain. Thrask seized the opening, slamming Vaylor to the ground with a bone-shaking impact. Eli shut off the cutter, chest heaving, watching as Lyra stepped toward her fallen uncle. Vaylor rasped, struggling to rise. You think you've won? Lyra looked down at him, her expression a mixture of sorrow and resolve. No. I think you've lost. Before Vaylor could retaliate, the station alarms shifted tone, signaling retreat. His surviving forces were withdrawing. Thrask confirmed it with a brief scan. They're pulling back to their ships. The attack has failed. Vaylor glared at Eli with venom. This is not the end. Lyra answered quietly, no. But it is the beginning of yours. When Vaylor was secured and taken into custody, the adrenaline slowly drained from Eli's body. Lyra approached him, her movements deliberate, her expression softening. You fought beside me, she said. Fearless. Loyal. He shook his head. I wasn't fearless. I was terrified. But you stayed, she whispered. And that is what courage truly is. Eli met her gaze, the weight of everything they had endured settling between them. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Lyra's scales shimmered in warm affirmation as she reached for his hand. And somewhere deep within the quiet hush after the battle, the future, uncertain, dangerous, and full of promise, unfolded before them.